Hello, I'm Robert Walker, and I help people on Facebook who are scared of many things for our Facebook group, Doomsday Debunked. And many of them are getting help from psychologists, but sometimes the psychologists or the counsellors, they feel that they don't understand where they're coming from and what their problem is. And so this is a video I've done, and if someone shows you this video to you, they may be having a bit of difficulty explaining this to you. So I'm not a psychologist, I'm just someone who helps these people, but I can help communicate what their problem is and what's scaring them. So the main thing they find is that the people that they are asking to help them are just not aware of how scared they are. And these people can be absolutely terrified. They often say they've vomiting with fear, heart racing, breathing very fast, difficulty sleeping, and it can be difficult I think, for psychologists to believe for some reason that they can get so scared just from reading something on the internet. I think that's where these confusions come in, and why they find it difficult to explain. And some of the people I help have been diagnosed by psychologists as having post-traumatic stress disorder, just from something they read on the internet. So I'm just going to show you some of these things they read, and it's just the only thing I want you to understand, I'm trying to help understand, is just quite how scared they get, and some of the effects they have. So a lot of them, at the moment, I'm getting many PMs from people who are scared of this asteroid, because the Daily Express has claimed that NASA has warned that a big asteroid is going to hit Earth in April. It's completely made up. NASA have no warning at all. And it's just fake news. But Google just doesn't filter out these fake news stories from the Daily Express. And so these people genuinely believe that something terrifying is going to happen to the Earth in just a few weeks' time. And we have very intelligent people. We have people who are students at university, but they're not astronomers. They don't know where to fact-check something like this. And they may have to leave university for a semester because they're so scared of these asteroid stories. I've helped people who are afraid to leave their house. Never had anything psychologically wrong with them before that. And they just got terrified by reading Google News. I did this, and at the moment there are no asteroid warnings. I did this non-techy version. Part of it is that there is a NASA site about these asteroid warnings, but it's very techy and hard for people to read. If I bring it up, then you could probably see, if you look at this, you just don't know what to make of that. And they can't read that and see that it's safe, but this is what it's saying. So that helps some of them. So this another example is the idea of a superflare, and you have these terrifying videos and people claiming that the sun could suddenly brighten up and make Earth uninhabitable overnight. And this is again fake news. And you can imagine being absolutely terrified if you read that. It looks very scientific, and they cite actual papers, and just a few years back there was a possibility that as they found out that stars like the Earth do have superflares that could be absolutely devastating to the Earth. But there was clear evidence that the Earth had never experienced a superflare in the past. There's no melted rock on the moon. The Galilean satellites of Jupiter are covered in ice and they hadn't melted. So the question for the astronomers was, why hasn't our sun produced a superflare? And eventually they found out why. And so we now know it can't do it. But if you don't know how to search these things up, if you don't know how to read the science, it's very difficult to find that information that I just explained to you in a few words. And so people read this on Google News and they think it's true, and they're absolutely terrified that any time now the sun is basically going to be made uninhabitable by a superflare. And then again, extreme anxiety. No surprise if you believe that. So those are the quite scientific ones, sort of. You need to have good science to know how to check those. That's where we can help on Doomsday Debunked. So but even once they know that it's debunked, they've had that past experience of being absolutely terrified, and they need a lot of psychological help just to get over that, like PTSD. As I said, some have been diagnosed with PTSD, or it might be acute stress disorder, but it's very severe anxiety anyway. And I have people crying and vomiting and all that sort of thing. And then, now this is another one, and this is for people who are religious, who are somewhat religious in nature, and they've got a strong faith, but they have had very little education in Christianity, usually Christianity, and then they read that and they don't have a good science background, then they go online and they read that the Earth's crust is suddenly going to slip, and that this is going to bring back Jesus, and Jesus is going to come, and then everyone's going to go into heaven, but the people who are left behind are going to have an absolutely terrible time, and anyone who's good is going to go up into heaven. And you get these stories like this. There's nothing in the Bible about that. It's just made up by some chap with very idiotic ideas. And the Earth's crust can't slip. It's totally impossible. This is a past date that many people in our group were absolutely terrified of. Some of them quite young, some of them just not got a very strong education, and quite often autistic people get very stuck on these ideas because they have very little, I don't know why, but a quarter of our members are autistic, and so that's something to bear in mind, that they are particularly affected by some of these stories. They find it difficult difficult to see that this is made up as a story, and this just invented it, and then they keep asking me, why did he say that? Why did he say this if it's not true? And they get into quite a tangle about that. And then because their faith, they believe in Jesus, and then they think that he's actually talking about Jesus, and have endless talks about that. So it may seem like not just OCD or something, but what you're missing, if it's just OCD, is the extreme terror that they have, absolute terror, absolute fear of the Earth's crust slipping, and it's not at all schizophrenia or anything like that. They don't get diagnosed with that typically. It's not a psychosis. Who knows? Maybe this chap has a psychosis, but these people are believing it because this chap says it. And this is another one that's very similar. This chap claimed that Freemasons, who most people know live north of the equator, that he said they have a secret plan to kill all people north of this line. And then he said Israel is south of the line, which of course is absolute nonsense. Most people know Israel is north of the equator. And he said if you travel south of the equator on this particular date, it's a past date now, then he said you will be safe. But everyone white who's north of the equator, if you're coloured, you're absolutely fine, no matter where you are. It was the most nutty idea I've ever come across. But again, people, and often especially autistic people, then they get very caught up in how can someone be saying these things, because he says it very sincerely. And again, he might have some psychosis that leads him to believe this. He comes over as having extreme sincerity, which the autistic people pick up on, very good at picking up on sincerity, in my experience. And they just think, oh, this chap is so sincere. I know it seems nutty, but what if he's right? And then they get terrified. So anyway, all I wanted to do is to explain, and even if people come up and tell you very, very strange things like this, it's not coming from their own mind. It's come to them externally from Google News, from YouTube. Lots of them are from YouTube as well, and places like that. So please, when you're diagnosing them, bear in mind, for them this is reality that has come to them from outside. It's not something they're generating. And it's something that they're reading as news, which they think is bona fide news or bona fide prophecy, and they get very, very terrified. And if you can understand that, then you will be able to diagnose them much better. And I know that from practice, because I get people I help, and they say, I just can't talk to my psychologist, they're just not listening, they don't believe me, they don't understand me. And then I sometimes say, well, if this psychologist is not working for you, if it's not clicking, then you need to find another psychologist, This is apparently what I've been told by a psychologist friend who tells me that if you're not a psychologist researcher friend, a researcher into psychology, and she tells me that clinical psychologists and so on, that if it's not clicking, it is perfectly legitimate to find another psychologist. So I tell them, you've got to find another psychologist if it's not clicking. And then they find another psychologist who then it does click, and they understand that they're how terrified they are. They get the right diagnosis, and this is very treatable. Many of the people I help, when they get the right treatment, then they're over it in weeks to months, and sometimes faster. So it's partly with me and our group helping debunk. If there's no psychological help, then the people do get over these fears with constant debunking and reassurance over about a year, up to a year. It can be more than that. But with the right psychological help, it can be much faster. And the psychologists make a huge difference. But if they get the wrong diagnosis, then it can get much worse. And we get these people being treated in the wrong way, and they just get more and more terrified. And then we say to you, this is not clicking, you're getting more scared, this can't be right, there's something that's not worked. And then sadly they have to leave that psychologist sometimes if the psychologist is just not able to listen to them and understand. They find the right psychologist, and it's incredibly dramatic how much it can change. There's one member who was just panicking many times a day, got the right psychologist, and within a few weeks he was so much better. So please do understand how terrified they are, and then I'm sure you'll be able to diagnose them correctly, and that's all I wanted to say with this video. Thanks very much, hope this helps.